So welcome to this session of post-migration in the arts, where for tonight we are focusing on Palestine. Post-migration in the arts is a series of online conversations that brings together artists, activists, academics, people with lived experience of forced migration. And we have these conversations looking at what is happening around forced migration and also around the arts. For tonight's session, we are joined by Abdelfattah Abusrour, who is founder and director of Alrowwad Cultural and Arts Society, which was established in 1998 in Aida refugee camp in Bethlehem. Abdelfattah is also an author, an actor, a theater director, and there's a PhD in biological and medical science from France. He abandoned his career in biology because he believed in the power of art and culture as pure humanity, where stereotypes vanish and people are on equal ground. And our second speaker is Maria Photiou, who is an art historian at the University of Derby. Maria's research currently focuses on art and migration from feminist and decolonial perspectives, with a focus on the Middle East. And she is co-editor of the anthology Art, Borders and Belonging on home migration, on home and migration. So maybe we start with you, Abdelfattah. In this introduction, have we missed anything?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for hosting me. I guess you covered the essential about who I am academically and artistically. So I was born in Aida refugee camp, which is one of 59 refugee camps which were established after the tragedy that we call Nakba. My parents were among the first generation of refugees who were uprooted from their villages and ended in dispersed in different parts of the world. And my family, part of my family, ended in Bethlehem in Aida refugee camp. And their villages were destroyed, of course, like 534 villages at that time. And I was born in Aida, raised in Aida refugee camp, and was lucky to get a scholarship to continue my studies in France, where I got my PhD in biological and medical engineering. But my heart was also with theater, painting, photography. So 9 years in France were a great opportunity to develop my academic work as well as artistic work, and returned back to Palestine, thinking that Palestine was only waiting for me to save it. So I started working with my biology degree to earn my living, teaching and doing research in Bethlehem University and work in Bijala pharmaceutical company, and then volunteering to train theater and painting until I founded Alrowwad with a group of friends in 1998 with this philosophy that I call beautiful resistance. Partly because I believe every act of resistance against injustice, oppression, occupation, dictatorship is a beautiful act of humanity, but also resisting through culture, arts, education are great acts of resistance because the aim was how to save lives, how to inspire hope, how to give our children and young people possibilities to express themselves in the most beautiful, creative, non-armed ways, and hopefully think living rather than dying for their country or whatever cause they are defending. Because no parents in the world want to live the day where they bury their children. We want to see our children grow up, celebrate their lives and successes, and hopefully be proud of the heritage we leave for them, and be proud of their achievement, and not walk in their funerals. So we are fed up of walking in the funerals of our children. And as you can see, almost every day, there is Palestinian youth who are killed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And it seems like normal thing for Palestinians to be killed and not their death is not accountable for by those who killed them, the Israeli oppression and occupation. So that's why it was about creating possibilities for these young people to express themselves in the most beautiful, creative way, and hopefully find a way to build their peace within themselves. They are the actors, they are the ones on stage, they are the stars. It's not just adults performing for children. They are the ones who tell their stories, who shout as loud as they want, and hopefully find a way to build peace within themselves. So that's why we started with theater, because I believe in the power of theater as one of the most amazing and powerful, civilized, non-politically correct ways to express yourself. Then, of course, if I ask the audience how many do theater, there is some, I know, that do theater, but a lot of people do not do that. So we added dance, singing, music, photography, video, whatever means to give these possibilities for young people to find ways to express themselves and build their peace within. Working with kindergartens, with the schools, with parents, focusing on mothers and women, because also I believe it's women who change the world much more than the men. So it was important to help build these possibilities and connect family together, connect teachers and the students together, go all over the West Bank with mobile programs like theater training, dance training, music, photography, mobile cinema, where we project films all over the West Bank, from the south of Hebron to the north of Jenin, a play bus where we manufacture games to make education fun and not just memorization and dictation, and tour internationally with our shows, because I believe in the power of arts to put people on equal grounds. When you see a film or a theater play, or look at a painting or a photo or listen to music, I don't think people will say, I will not like it because it's a French or American or British or Palestinian. You like, you don't like, based on how much it touches you. So this is where stereotypes disappear, and this is the power of arts to put people in equal grounds and gap these, build these bridges among them as equally human beings. So that's the essence of it. Beautiful Resistance was a way to give possibilities, not dictate a code of behavior. We are not affiliated to any political party, but we work with everybody, but not under the umbrella of anybody. And one of the important things that we did was we work with people as partners, not as charity makers or as a humanitarian aid, in the sense that people presenting Palestinian cause as a humanitarian cause. It's a political cause. People are not poor because they are lazy or don't have resources. We are put into the poverty on one side by this illegal Israeli occupation, which deprives us from the right to circulate freely, to import, to export, to fall in love even with whoever we want. With this segregation between Palestine 48, Jerusalem, Gaza, the West Bank, the world, but unfortunately also by donor countries, which most of the time come to dictate us what we should do, rather than consult with us and help us do what we really need to do. Or humanitarian agencies who think that the only way to help these poor, miserable people is to send food and clothes and everything is fine. This is more humiliating than the occupation itself in the case of Palestine. We are not here to present ourselves and weep on our misery and solicit pity from people and blackmail people emotionally to give and throw some crumbs on the table, but to give them this possibility to be partners, consult with us, build infrastructures, create jobs, help people keep their dignity, make charity positive, constructive, and developmental, rather than to keep it passive and negative, like most of what is happening around the world. We are not an emergency situation. It's a continuous colonization that has been going on since 75 years. So we cannot respond. We don't want people to respond to by reactions to certain events. It's an action on the long term that should be done to make injustice visible and make the values that we talk about, justice, freedom, peace, equality, love, as values that we share as human beings, whether we are Muslim or Christian or Jewish or Buddhist or Hindu or atheist or whatever we are. So there is no compromises on these values. They don't change based on who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed. Unfortunately, we see how much elasticity there is in these values when it depends on who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed. So this is the essence of Alrowwad: work with everybody, but not under the umbrella of anybody, work according to priorities and needs of the community, open its spaces. Behind me, you see the kitchen where we cook meals, package them, especially during COVID and the month of Ramadan, for the fasting month for Muslims, deliver food to the homes and not show people in their misery and pity, because we respect and honor our people, and we ought to show them in their strength and dignity, not in weakness and humiliation. So whatever humanitarian agencies come to say, show us some poor cases and film them and so on, we don't do that. We don't show the people we send clothes to. We give them coupons. They go to the shop, buy whatever they want with the certain amount of money, and it's their choice, not packages and throw them and they choose whatever fits them and so on. So that's why all the work with what we do, expanding our programs to help our people one way or the other and response to their needs, and not come with a magic wand and say theater will resolve everything or dance will resolve everything. We do not work also in the spirit of art therapy or music therapy or whatever. My interest and focus is on the concept of a creativity of these children and young people and women and so on. It's the creative process that has a byproduct of healing, but it's them working on their auto healing and not somebody tell them you are sick and you need a treatment and this is the way to do it. So that's, for us, is important, that people are active and not just passive and recipients of what is given to them. They are the ones who are working to make it happen, and not just the other tell them this is the magical card that you should use to solve your problems or whatever. They are part of the solution. We believe that everybody is important, that everybody is a change maker. And when people say it's hopeless, we don't have this luxury of despair. So we have to do what we have to do. Hopefully others will join. But even if they will not join, we will continue. If people are waiting for miracles to happen, I don't believe miracles will happen alone. We need to provoke them to happen. And that's how we can work it together, through arts, through culture, through education, through politics, through whatever means, to make people think that they can live in dignity and solve problems without thinking that the only way to change anything is to carry a gun and shoot everybody else or go and explode themselves. This is the summit of despair when people reach that point. And we need to solve our issues and our problem with a creative and hopefully non-armed ways. Again, in a context of occupation and oppression, I guess everybody agrees that people under occupation, under oppression, have a legitimate right to resist by all means. But again, this is a last issue of despair for a lot of people when they think the guns are the only solution. We have enough of children killed, we have enough people killed. So that's why I hope that these possibilities and people who are artists, who have a lot of followers and can create an impact, to empower those who work with arts and culture and education, because it's the only way forward for our humanity, for this world that is begging for peace in every part of the world. It's not only here in Palestine or in Yemen or in Libya or in Syria or in Iraq or in Lebanon or wherever, every part of the world, or in Africa and so on. There is a lot of injustices in this world, and we have to be truthful to the values that we defend. And I believe that arts could be helping in making justice visible one way or the other. I'll probably stop here to give a space for Maria and then for the others to intervene. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. How about you, Maria? How did you get here? How did you come to be having this conversation with us? How did your
Yes,
journey begin?
well, it's hard to say after listening to everything Abdelfattah has done. Yeah, mine is very limited, but I will share what I've done. So in my, like you said, Abros, I'm an art historian, and in my work I explore women artists' representation, and specifically how they represent home, exile, and the sense of belonging. And I specifically write about women artists from countries who have experienced conflict. And it all started from the time I did my PhD about 15 years ago. And I did on women artists from Cyprus, where I'm originally from. And at the time, there was no history about women artists in Cyprus. Everything was about men, and it was written by a male perspective. And this, of course, is nothing new. Many other countries share similar challenges because, unfortunately, we have the male perspective, and many times writers do not take in consideration that the women experiences might be different and include those. And specifically for me, for Cyprus, it was quite striking that all the history was written uh, prioritizing men, and you will see really long sentences and paragraphs about men in books, whereas for women would be very short. And there was even a reference to the fatherhood of Cypriot art. And there are other countries who have similar, and we will all acknowledge that by saying fatherhood, this does not include any woman. But in the case of Cyprus, alongside the fatherhood was a woman who was very active, and she did 3 solos exhibition, and this was in the 1930s and 40s. And at the time, Cyprus was under British rule, so it was a quite significant thing for a woman to do 3 solos exhibition. And it was only the 1990s that her work was acknowledged by the Cyprus Ministry of Culture. So that you can see there was a long pause in how her work was acknowledged and appreciated. And of course, the work of the woman artists in Cyprus, because Cyprus is divided, the division is a fundamental element in the works of the contemporary artists. And while I was finishing my PhD, I was at an event where it was a network, and they had partners from Palestine. I think it was International Art Academy from Palestine. And it was quite striking because for me it was the first time I was seeing Palestinian art, and the representations I was seeing, the themes and the conversations was very similar to what I was getting from the discussions and the interviews I had with the women artists from Cyprus. So that was the first point where I started thinking about there are some similarities. Of course, it's very different. I'm not comparing Palestine and Cyprus because obviously Palestine, like Abdelfattah explained, is there is an ongoing disruption there, and it's ongoing what is happening. But I do explore in my research some similarities in terms of how exile happened, specifically with the events in 1948 for Palestine, and then the sense of belonging for the two communities, because there are some similarities. So I do talk about these things in my research. And most recently, I'm looking, at the Middle East as a whole, because all the countries in the Middle East have experienced wars. They've all been occupied at some point from, whoever empire was in domination at that point, and later once it got their independence, then unfortunately, more wars followed, civil wars, or there were other kind of wars, invasions, and so on. So I do look at women's specific experiences because, again, women have been excluded many times from the narratives or the evidence and the records. And I'm interested in exploring and giving voice to the experiences of women, also because there is a special connection between women and their homes. And again, there's a special connection for Palestinian women and Cypriot women. So in summary, this is what I do.
And then maybe we go back to you, Abdelfattah, and we go back to Palestine. What is happening right now in Palestine? What is everyday life like?
Well, as I said, I was born in Aida refugee camp, which is one of the 59 refugee camps which were established, one of 19 in the West Bank, one of the 3 in Bethlehem Governorate. It has about 6,200 people who originate from 43 different villages, among the ones which were destroyed in 1948. Two-thirds of this population are under 24 years old, with more than 60% of unemployment rate, living on a space of about like 60,000 square meters of land. So it's very confined space surrounded by this illegal wall of expansion and annexation on the east and north, with 6 towers of Israeli snipers, cameras of surveillance, and was classified as the zone the most exposed to tear gas in the world in a study by Berkeley University in 2017. And recently, the Israeli military have installed an automatic cannon for tear gas canisters on the oriental side of the camp on the wall. So there is a frequent incursions. There is frequently children who are kidnapped kind of in the middle of the night by Israeli soldiers for interrogation, imprisonment, or whatever. The camp is frequently attacked by the tear gas and the soldiers coming in. And there is no day where there is not a young man or a young woman killed in different parts of the West Bank and so on. So unfortunately, with the recent also Israeli government, which composed two of the most extremist settlers, Smotrich, Minister of Finance, and Ben-Gvir, Minister of Interior, who gave carte blanche for the killing of Palestinians, who congratulates every settler or every soldier who kills Palestinian. And these people, killers, are without any accountability for killing Palestinians. As Gideon Levy, the Israeli journalist in Haaretz, said, Palestinians are considered less than animals. And if you dare to compare them with animals, there would be some Israeli associations that are for animals who would contest how he dares compare Palestinians to animals. We are still less than that. So there is no moral burden within that mentality of killing a Palestinian. And the easiest way is just to say that he wanted to attack. And in many evident cases, a knife was put by the soldier somewhere. And look, we have photos without any knife when the action happened of the killing of this young man, Palestinian. And then in another photo, you can see a knife added to the photo afterwards. So there is this burden of young people who could just be killed immediately without any attack, anything that is happening. And the balance of things that people say, you should forget, you should forgive, move on, and so on. I mean, I would be happy to forget something when it ends. But how can you forget something that is happening with you every day, every second in your life, and you are reminded continuously that there is always something happening? And the Israelis are so intelligent or so stupid that they remind us every single second in our life that we are still under occupation, that there is a Palestinian Authority who has no real authority on anything, that this is not only the promised land, but also the permitted land, where they can do whatever they want and leave without any accountability. And people say, Israel has the right to defend itself. I agree that everybody has the right to defend themselves, including this Israeli occupation, but it's both ways. The oppressed also have the right to defend themselves, and they are not entitled to accept injustice and oppression and be thankful for it. And when people say you should forgive, again, we are generous people. We proclaim that we are a country of multiplicity and diversity, a culture of inclusion and not exclusion, that Palestinians are not only Muslims, but there is also Christians, there is also Israelites, and there is also Jews, and so on. So it's a culture of inclusion and not exclusion. So when it becomes exclusively for this or that, This is a racist concept that cannot fit with our culture and identity in that sense. So forgive, who apologized or asked for our forgiveness? To start with the French, with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Monsieur Jules Cambon, on the 4th of June 1917, followed by the British, Lord Balfour, on the 2nd of November 1917. Neither the French nor the British apologized for what the promises they made to the Zionist movement, nor the UN, which partitioned our country without asking for our opinion, nor the Israelis, who are continuously grabbing more land and create more tragedies and ongoing Nakba that continues 75 years later, nor all those who support Israel, who are proclaiming that they are with Israel, but in fact they are with this apartheid system. They are with this drug addict or power addict by providing more drugs for the drug addict instead of cutting the drugs out so that Israel would recover one way or the other. So the essence of it is that there is a lot of things that are happening that in no way people can forget and forgive, because the injustice is continuous and there is no relief. And there is these international dictations who come to ask organizations like us to, if they want to have funding, to sign that there are Palestinian political groups who are terrorist groups, while they give free, legitimate right for every act of resistance against oppression, occupation in a lot of countries in the world. And I guess the Ukraine example is clearly visible that people have the right to defend themselves, and they should be supported to defend themselves when there is oppression or war or occupation or whatever. But when it concerns Palestine, it becomes another issue, and people try to be politically correct or diplomatic about it, while in no way that would help Israel on the long term to be this democracy that they claim, because clearly it is not. And the case of the Israeli people now in the streets protesting against this government who hijacked the high court and want to change laws to make possibility for the government to do whatever they want without accountability, even against the Israeli activist or whatever, then there is a problem with this mentality that continues to justify what Israel is doing, and those who criticize Israel as anti-Semitic or whatever. And I need to clarify something also about these terminologies that are continuously used as if they are really the same. Israeli, Jew, Zionist, Semite, and Israelite. Now we know that we have the oldest Israelite community in the world in Palestine, which I refer to as the Samaritan community, and they are there since more than 3,500 years in the city of Nablus in the north of Palestine. And they present themselves as Israelites and as Palestinians, but not as Jews, because Judaism was not born yet. So clearly, not every Israelite is Jewish. Not every Jew is Israelite as well, because there has been conversion. Then the Zionism is a political movement that has nothing to do with the religion, even though they hijacked religion to justify a land without a people for a people without a land and so on. But again, is every Israeli or is every Jew a Zionist? Not every Jew is Zionist, and not every Zionist is Jewish. Is every Jew Israeli? Again, you tell me, because not every Jew is Israeli, and not every Israeli is Jewish. Is every Jew Semite? Or every Israeli Semite? I am Semite, I am Muslim. The Palestinian Christian, the Palestinian Jews, the Arab, or in this part of the world, whether they are Muslim or Christian or Jewish, are Semites. So if you are African or American, you have nothing to do with Semitism in that sense, because it's related to Sam, son of Noah, which is in this part of the world, not in everywhere, and so on. So not every Jew is Semite, and not every Semite is Jewish. And that's where the confusion is. So whatever you say, criticizing Israel, you become anti-Semitic, you become anti-this, anti-that. You are in the UK, you demonstrate in the streets, don't you? Are you hating Christians? Are you hating white people? Are you hating English people? Or you protest because you want to see justice, you want to see better situation, you want the government to do better things, and so on. People protest sometimes by love, not only by hate, and so on. And there is minimum infinite thing that is related to hate when people move and demonstrate against something. So that's why a lot of the problem that is happening with keeping people silent against every criticism against the government or against Israel or against whatever power there is, it is not the democracy that people are talking about when we can see that clearly. So the situation, unfortunately, is tragic. And I see a lot of tragedies all over the world, unfortunately. And that's why we identify with every oppressed people. We did identify with Afro-American today. We identify with Indigenous Americans, Indigenous Australians. We identify with South Africans. We identify today with Muslims in Myanmar and in China and in India. And wherever there is injustice, Ukrainian or whoever, it's not acceptable to have people suffer because they are of this color or that religion or that ethnicity and so on. That is not acceptable today and should not be any time in the history. But sometimes we find people justifying the oppression of some people because they are of this color or this belief or whatever. And how we can move forward as a human being on equal grounds if we can legitimize oppression because of people color or people ethnicity or religion or faith or whatever, or gender even, and so on. So for us, the time is not, as I said, we don't have the luxury of despair, but we don't have the luxury of time. I have children who I work with, and that was one of the reasons I quit my paying jobs in biology in 2005. When you discuss with children and talk about their hopes and dreams, and they, of course, there is those who want to be doctors, engineers, lawyers, pilots, teachers, artists, and so on. But when you have an 8-year-old or 10 years old children who look you in the face and say, I want to die. Why do you want to die? Because nobody cares. Because when the Israeli soldiers come in the middle of the night, there is no protection. There is nobody to protect. And so how did we fail to convince even an 8-year-old child that there is hope? As educators, as politicians, as teachers, as artists, as whatever, when this is the summit of helplessness for us when we face this child. And that's why we say we do care. And maybe we are not with you in the middle of the night or at 2 in the morning when the Israeli soldiers come, but we do care. We want you to live, to grow up and change the world and create miracles and be proud of your achievement, that you are important, that your country will not be alive with death and corpses. It needs you to grow up and build this country of tomorrow for you and the generations to come. And that's why we continue to do that path of inspiring hope and promoting life and giving possibilities and work with everybody, but not under the umbrella of anybody. We are not here to fulfill the donor's agenda, but people's agenda, the people we serve. We are here to say that we are human beings. We reclaim and we defend our humanities, our humanity. We are not born with genes of hatred or violence. Nobody is born with genes of hatred or violence, but nobody as well is born to be enslaved and oppressed and be thankful for the oppressors and occupier and say, I can't coexist with that. This is not possible on any level, that people should or have to coexist with oppression and injustice and occupation, and everybody should applaud them and give them money to coexist with injustice and say you should get used to it. If anybody in the world can accept that, they can ask Palestinians to accept it, or any oppressed people in the world. But this is not acceptable for people to be oppressed and be thankful for the oppressors for the continuous oppression.
How about you, Maria? What are you seeing when you look at Palestine?
Well, I think Abdelfattah, he said so many things. I cannot, from my own personal experience, I can see a lot of denial from Western countries and ordinary people. Like only last year, I was presenting at a conference and I was talking about art from Cyprus and Palestine. And someone asked me, and I talked to Eva about this as well when we met a few months ago. The question was, it was, I don't remember if it was a question or a comment, but it was, but these are old stuff. Why are you doing research on this old stuff? And why don't you do about Ukraine? Because obviously everyone is talking about Ukraine right now. So yeah, I got very angry and I was very upset how someone could even, think to say that out loud at the conference when it was the subject on migration and, the emerging themes. And I do think, even many Israelis are in denial. I've met over the years in conferences and other events, they just don't acknowledge what is happening. They're in complete denial. And I do think they've been brainwashed by their state and education. Although, there are others, Israeli, who do acknowledge and they do challenge in their own ways of what is happening. But I think, it's a big challenge, it's a big issue that how prominent is the narrative that when Abdelfattah mentioned this, that, supposedly it was a land without people for people without land. So based on that, there's all this narrative that the state of Israel is based on the narrative that Palestinians they volunteered to leave their homeland, and then Israeli just inhabited those areas in those villages, whereas everyone knows what really happened. There was a whole invasion. So it's very concerning that still there are people who don't acknowledge, and politicians as well. And it's very concerning that we continue in 2023 to have these discussions, and and I really, Abdelfattah, he said many things of what we could do. But yeah, I'm sharing the concerns about this.
And then going back to what you were saying about language, Abdelfattah, some of Palestine, West Bank and Gaza, they've also been described as compared to concentration camps, and also recently there is an argument in the US, in Britain, and also in Europe on whether or not Israel is an apartheid state. I don't know. What are your thoughts on?
I think there has been many UN reports, Amnesty International reports that, and even Israeli historians, Israeli journalists who have described Israel as an apartheid state. And even if you have listened to Mr. Ben-Gvir, Minister of Interior, recently, who said, my life is more important than Palestinians. I have more priority than the Palestinians, and the road and so on should be the priority for Israel. This is a country for Jews only, and so on. So you go to Hebron, there is streets, there is neighborhoods that are only for Jews, and Palestinians are not allowed in, even though originally there has been, of course, Palestinian Jews, but those who came from outside are not Palestinian of origin, and so on. There is about 400 settlers with about 2,000 soldiers protecting them among more than 120,000 Palestinians. And the city is divided, the old city is divided. Even the mosque was divided after an Israeli settler in Hebron killed 29 Palestinians during Ramadan, the prayer of the dawn, coming from their back and shooting them and injuring more than 40 or 50 people as well. So there is a kind of power for the settlers in that sense. And you can see how clearly it is moving into a culture of segregation, complete segregation, even for the Palestinians who have the Israeli nationality, who stayed in their homes in 1948 with the creation of what is called today Israel. Even if you look at the different, not only against Palestinians, but even against Jews who are Black Jews, for example, the racism that is there against Arab Jews or against Ethiopian Jews and so on, there has been a lot of demonstrations, including Jewish Israeli of African community and so on, protesting against the racism of this state, against its own Jewish people and so on. So unfortunately, those who have lived there have a conscience, even among the Israelis, clearly say that this is an apartheid system. And a lot of delegations who come from different countries, including South Africa, South African have said also, this is worse than the apartheid in South Africa, and so on. So unfortunately, the evidence continuously is going on to show that this is a country that says it is a Jewish country, it's only for Jews, even those the citizenship or nationality is for Jews and so on. So what you can make of it? They say they are the only democracy in the Middle East, but you can see also this mentality of segregation. When Maria referred to of the Zionist movements, a land without a people for a people without a land, you know, the first pioneers in the cinema in the Arab world were two brothers from Bethlehem called the brothers Lama, who started cinema in Egypt in the 1880s, long before the invention of Israel. The first print house in Palestine was in the Armenian quarter in the old city in Jerusalem in 1865, before the invention of Israel. When we talk about the first woman, Arab woman photographer, a Palestinian woman called Karima Aboud, who in the 1920s had 4 studios of her own. She was driving one of the 7 or 8 cars which existed in Bethlehem to go from her studio in Bethlehem to Jerusalem to Nazareth to Haifa. When we talk about women liberation movement in Palestine, the first Palestinian Women Union was created in 1921. This was, again, long before the invention of Israel. When we talk about artistic entrepreneurs and artistic cafes, selling tickets, hosting shows, hosting professional groups coming from Egypt, singers, musicians, theater people, and so on. And the theater cafes were not just cafes where an artist come and sing a song or play music, but they have theater spaces. They have a theater stage for performances. They were selling tickets and so on. When we talk about oranges of Jaffa packaged in fine tissue and exported internationally in the 1920s and so on, this was a land with people, with culture, with agriculture, with food, with transportation, bus lines going to different Arab capitals, railways going to different Arab capitals. People say, we had a breakfast in Haifa, we had lunch in Damascus, and we have dinner in Baghdad or in Cairo, and so on. This was a thriving culture, thriving multiplicity and diversity, and not a land without a people for a people without a land. Israel was created on a furnished country, in a country that has all the infrastructures. This first school for visually impaired in the Middle East was created in Hebron, in the old city in Hebron in 1934, and before that, vocational center also for visually impaired people in 1932 in Jerusalem, in Al-Quds, by a doctor who was also became blind, Dr. Dejani, and so on. So clearly, there was a lot of lies that are made by the Zionist movements with a land without a people for a people without a land, forgetting that this land hosted people from different parts of the world. If we are talking about the suffering, as I said, a lot of people are suffering. If we are talking about victims, Jews have been victims, Africans have been victims, the Belgians have killed 20 million in Congo. So why this history is just become only one suffering is more important than the other. Every suffering counts, every oppression counts. And that's why when we are in this hypocrisy of making, when the tragedy in Ukraine happened, the European response was, oh, these are people like us. It's not like the Afghanis or Yemenis or Libyans or Iraqi refugees. I mean, a refugee is a refugee, whatever their culture, their religion are. They are not people who just run away because they want to go to the other. They are forced out of their homes, out of their villages. It's the most tragic thing that people, when they are forced to leave because they cannot live anymore in that part of this world where they were born or where they want to remain for the rest of their lives. So unfortunately, Israel, sorry, I need to close the window because there is this shooting, I guess. So there is this continuous, unfortunately, publicity that this is a democratic country and so on, while even Israeli Jews say this is an apartheid system. And those who dare to challenge the system, then they are treated as self-hating Jews or anti-Semit, how they call it, anti-Semitic Jews even. They refer to them as, or traitors. And I guess you have in the UK, Ilan Pappé, one of the Israeli Jewish historian who wrote the book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, among others, and who say that this is a country that was built on killing Palestinians and uprooting them from their towns, and not just people ran away by fear or just left on their own. It was a programmed ethnic cleansing and so on. So what you can say about it? Is this really not an apartheid system?
Sorry, did you say there's shooting outside?
It's fireworks for people who have a wedding or whatever.
Okay. How about you, Maria? Is Israel an apartheid state, and are they treating Palestine like a concentration camp?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Abdelfattah to say, really, so I don't really have anything to add. But yeah, I think it is. I think Abdelfattah gave a full explanation, and I agree with everything he said.
And then maybe we go back to forced migration. What are you seeing in terms of the forced migration that's taking place? In relation to
me or Maria?
To Palestine, like forced migration, like what are you seeing?
Is the question for me or for Maria?
It's for you. It's for you. We'll start with you and then we'll go to Maria.
I mean, when we talk about Nakba and the ethnic cleansing, it was a programmed process in 1948. They made 70% of Palestinians homeless and dispersed in different parts of the world, officially in 59 refugee camps, 19 in the West Bank, 8 in Gaza, 10 in Jordan, 10 in Syria, 12 in Lebanon. But there is a lot of Palestinians also who were forced out, but did not end in the refugee camps because their dignity kind of did not permit them to accept this humiliation, to be waiting in line to receive crumbs and humanitarian aid one way or the other. So some of them ended also in Egypt, in Europe, in the US, in Latin America, and other countries, and so on. I guess the program is continuing until today, and Israeli governments, one after the other, and Mr. Ben-Gvir now, and so on, he wants to, this is a Jewish country, so Palestinians should leave. Anybody who is not Jewish should leave, and so on. So that's a continuous process, unfortunately. There are towns within what they refer to as Israel today, in the Negev, for example, which every time they build, it continuously destroyed. There is the Bedouin community who are living in what the parts which were occupied in 1948, who some of them are Israeli of nationality with the ID card, I mean, not because they are Jewish, but they are of Palestinian origin and so on. Then they are also continuously uprooted from this part to this part. If we refer to Zukhrut, I think, website, the number of villages that were destroyed up to date have risen up to more than 650 villages since 1948. So it's an ongoing forced migration, push people to leave one way or the other. And sometimes there is kind of encouragement of some European or North American countries and so on to invite Palestinians to immigrate and open their borders for Palestinian immigration and seduce them one way or the other to get the nationality and so on. So it's helping also Israel to push Palestinians to leave. And unfortunately, we have a lot of Christian community citizens of Palestine left because of the tragic situation. And of course, no parents want their children to be a number on the list of martyrs or handicapped for the rest of their lives or perish in Israeli prison. So some families leave because of fear for their children and the future that is there. And with every Israeli government that comes worse than the one which was before, then we are living in a context where the work is harder and harder for people to live in dignity. The money of taxes that is detained by the Israelis, even because every importation or exportation is controlled by the Israelis. It runs by Israeli intermediary. There is no direct Palestinian importation or exportation with any other country. The control on the border is by the Israelis. So they detain all the tax monies that people pay. And then it is used to blackmail Palestinian Authority to do this or that, or not have any money. So you have, since so many years now, Palestinian employees in the government, in education, in health system, or administration, or whatever, receive 80% of their salary, and sometimes do not receive the salary at all, and so on, even though it is a minimum salary compared to the Israelis. So if I look at a teacher in Palestine, after 20 years of work, their salary is about $1,000 per month. After about 20 years of work, the Israeli salary of a teacher starts by about double of the salary that the Palestinians have after 20 years of work. So you can see the gap between the minimum salary is 1,400. Today, it's 1,880 shekels per month. On the Israeli side, it's about 6,000 shekels per month. So 3 to 4 times the Palestinian minimum salary. But you buy a toothpaste, it's the same price, and even sometimes more expensive in Palestine because of the taxes that are added and so on. So it is a continuous way to control everything. The Israelis control our water. They sell our water to us 4 times the price. We have a 1/7 of a ratio that an Israeli have. They control the electricity, they control the telecommunication, they control whatever. So they can cut off anything in Palestine, the water, the electricity, the communication, the movement. There is one road that connects the south with the north of the West Bank. And so if it is blocked, one road only, and this is clearly for the Palestinians who do not have permits to pass through Jerusalem or whatever, one road only for all the cars, all the big trucks, buses, and vehicles and whatever, to pass from, for example, Hebron to Bethlehem to Ramallah and so on, bypassing Jerusalem from the east. If it is blocked, and usually it is blocked for some hours during the day, then it's complete paralysis for the movement and so on. So everything around is kind of pushing people to leave one way or the other. But in the same time, I guess people are committed to stay, and most of them stay because this is our land. And I lived in France 9 years for my education. I love France, but I cannot say that I felt foreigner there. And I guess you can see where France is going with now as well. And coming back there, even I felt more strange than before, because all the context of Palestine has been in this context of continuously incursions, oppression, difficulty of movement, and so on. So it is very challenging. And if people were not committed to the roots they have, I guess we would have a huger immigration of Palestinians uh, outside, because nothing is inspiring hope anymore. And when I say we don't have the luxury of despair, we are kind of fighting to keep this hope, because when you work with children and young people, and those children who say to you, I want to die because nobody cares, if you send them, yes, go and die, then you are committing a crime with these generations who have lost hope. So that's why we reclaim that part, that we don't have the luxury of despair, not because we are superheroes or because we are beyond suffering or whatever, but because we are committed to bring better days for our children and your children and the generations to come. A work that means that we do care about the future of the children in this world, about the heritage we leave for them, and not just don't care about what tomorrow will bring for them. And this is also part of the magic of the arts. I see that somebody asked about theater and what we do and so on, but we can tackle that when you want as well.
How about you, Maria? What are you seeing around Palestine and forced migration?
I think it would be best for me to answer questions in relation to art and forced migration, because obviously Abdelfattah, he has first-hand knowledge and exactly what is happening at the moment, whereas me, I'm just looking specific art and I connect to the events that has happened in the past. So I don't think I'm the right person to answer this kind of question.
So maybe we start with you, and we talk about art again in forced migration. What are your thoughts on that connection?
Is that for me?
Yeah, for you.
Yeah.
And then we take the same question to Abdelfattah.
Yeah, I mean, could I share, because I prepared some slides, it might be easier if I share, for everyone to see rather than me just talking about it. Can you see the slide I've shared?
Yes.
Yeah, so we talked about the, how the slogan, a land without people and for people without land, and how the Israeli narrative in a way wants to eliminate the whole Palestinian history, and exactly what Abdelfattah talked about, all the amazing stuff that happened before to Palestine and how innovative and they did so many things first. And then I think this is where a Palestinian art can be really powerful, to challenge this narrative and to showcase the Palestinian narrative. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Emily Jassir's work. She's she's well known. I think she's one of the most celebrated Palestinian artists. And this was the work she did. And the title is a memorial to 418 Palestinian villages, which were destroyed, depopulated, and occupied by Israel in 1948. And I'll just briefly say a few things about this work in case you're not familiar with. This work happened back in 2000 when Jassir was invited to participate at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And for the project, Jassir bought a family-sized refugee tent, which is exactly like the ones that the UN gives to refugees in times of crisis. And then she stenciled the names of the 480 Palestinian villages into the top and the sides of the tent. and she got the names of the names from a book. There is a book which is written by Walid Khalidis, and it writes about, I think the title is All That Remains, the Palestinian villages which were destroyed and depopulated in 1948. So at the beginning of the project, just as she was working alone, thinking she will have the time to stitch, because she wanted to stitch all of the names onto the tent. But she soon realized she wouldn't be able to do it. So she communicated to the local community in New York if anyone would be willing to go and help her. And a total of 140 people joined her, and they stitched together. And you can see, how some people are sitting there on the bottom image where they're working together, stitching the name of the villages. And what is really interesting is the actual making of this work. So every time someone will start a new name of a village, they will refer back to the book, and Walid Khalid's book, and they will talk about the village, they will talk about what happened, how it was destroyed, and who lived there. And these 140 people are people from all over the world. Some were Palestinians, some were Israelis, and other, there's lots from the Middle East as well. So in a way, this became an act of collective remembrance for Palestinian history. And it's worth noting that this work happened during the second Intifada, and the people who were working on it were very worried about what was happening back in Palestine. So in a way, this collective effort became a coping mechanism for the ones who were working, and they were talking about what was happening back in Palestine as well. And I think what is really powerful about this work is that first, the name of the villages are stances on the top and the side. If you see, the front is empty. And this is something Jasir did on purpose, because she wanted to pass the message that the destruction of Palestine is ongoing and potentially more villages could be added to that. So she wanted to imply that more names could be added because of what is happening, and this is ongoing. Then the artist chose English as a language, not only because she did it in New York and participants will speak English, but also because this work will have been exhibited internationally. So she wanted the international audience to see the names and read them out loud and think, why do they not know about these villages? What happened to these villages? And why do the history books do not refer to them? And also, as you can see, the title is really long. It says it's a memorial to 480 Palestinian villages which were destroyed, depopulated, and occupied by Israel in 1948. With this, Jasir wanted to make it clear and leave no space for interpretation and misunderstanding of what had happened in 1948. So the press and everyone who is writing about it has to write the title as a complete title. And again, it's a very powerful strategy to preserve the history and the reality of what had happened in 1948. And I think the fact that this art, this installation has been exhibited internationally, it really provides an agency to Palestinian history about what has happened and how it should be remembered. And in brief, this is this work. I'll stop sharing if you want to ask something.
Maybe before we come back to you, Maria, we go to Abdel. What is the art that is being made in Palestine right now? What is it focusing on? What is it doing? What themes is it exploring? And how are people doing it?
You mean within cultural artistic communities, art centers, or in general?
Where you start is up to you.
Yeah. So I guess there is a lot of challenges on different levels, unfortunately. So it's the Israelis or the Israeli government or soldiers are not the only worry. What we are challenged with is our own narrative, our own story. and that even our own resistance. As I said, according to every law in the world, according to UN resolution, every act of resistance is legitimate by all means, whether it's armed or non-armed struggle, even though 99% of Palestinians never carried a gun in their life, and they resisted through a lot of creative and non-armed ways. But yet you have US aid or you have European Commission, which kind of force the NGOs who want to have funding, and if they're approved funding, then they have to sign this document that would criminalize 6 or 7 Palestinian political parties as terrorist groups. While again, the resistance is legitimate by all means, according to every law in the world. So a lot of Palestinian NGOs kind of boycott these kind of funding because we cannot be dictated that our resistance is terrorism, even though, as I said, 99% of Palestinians resisted through non-armed ways. The other thing is that the projects that come to deviate us from our priorities and needs and come with an agenda that is irrelevant to our priorities and needs. So they become, some organizations become project-oriented and not mission-oriented. And this is a struggle that we live with because there is a lot of issues that people bring on the table that are not related to Palestinians. The most also oppressing thing is the humanitarian aspect of it that is presented, that, okay, we need to help Palestinians get food and clothes and whatever, but we should show the people who receive waiting in line, make it the most miserable condition so that people are blackmailed emotionally and so on, so that people are giving for these poor, miserable people. And again, as I said, this is more humiliating than the occupation itself. We show our people in their strength and dignity. If you look at our website or Facebook page or whatever, you show the dance, you see the education, you see the trips, you see the culture, you see the thriving community, and so on. We work to establish a cinema school and production house for young cinema makers, actually, and we work to establish a music school and so on, looking for partners for that, because we need to give these possibilities for our young people. When we help people with food or whatever, we cook meals, package them, send them to the homes, to the people. We document what we do, our cooking, packaging, and sending volunteers to send the meals, but not those who receive. Why would people want to see those who receive? And transform the things like what happens in different countries, sending food, feed Africa, feed this, feed that, but it did not help any people in any developmental way. We need to move from this passive or negative format into something positive, constructive, and developmental, and be proud of the result of our achievement. When we build the most beautiful thing we can offer, because we owe our children to live in dignity and be in the best situation, even in a refugee camp, even if we consider it as temporary situation and so on, because we are entitled to live in a better situation and not, when people visit us, weep on our misery and so on. The injustice is clear and visible, and we not need to make kind of makeup for it in that sense. So a lot of challenges, people try to keep their narrative. The Israelis now are forcing all the schools in the eastern part of Jerusalem to adopt the Israeli narrative. They want to erase anything related to the history, our own version of history, our own version of what has happened, and so on. They don't want to allow any talk about Nakba, any talk about Palestinian cities and narrative that everything is fine, that Jews, Muslim, Christians are living in harmony, and so on. Maybe before 1948 or 1930s, that was the case, but afterwards, with the Zionism and so on, it's not the case. and so on. So there is a huge pressure on schools in the eastern part of Jerusalem, on the Palestinian Authority, even by European donors, to stop any narrative that could harm the Israeli version of the story and the history, and so on. And this is a huge challenge that is done with the benediction of the international community, unfortunately, mostly the Americans and European funders who pay money for the Palestinian Authority to keep it surviving one way or the other, because they need the support of the Palestinian Authority one way or the other, but in the same time discredited, so that people lose faith in this authority that has no real authority on the ground, with the Israeli incursions every second, one way or the other. We try to focus on the possibilities. Political parties, when they talk about elections or whatever, we are under occupation. So when you have elections and even the president cannot move from one city to the other without the permission of the Israeli soldier at the checkpoint, let alone the Israeli government and so on. So any 18 or 20 years old soldier at a checkpoint can stop the minister or the president from moving from Bethlehem to Ramallah at a checkpoint. And that's the point. And it did happen. It did happen. If the Palestinian president wants to leave Ramallah to go to Jordan or whatever, it goes through the Israeli coordination by an Israeli permit and so on. So the challenges are enormous. The funders are helping this situation to remain according to the Israeli version of it, even though sometimes there is timid criticism for the Israeli government, but there is no accountability. There is no stopping of American aid for Israel or European facilitated relations and exportation, importation, whatever, financial or military support, and so on. And they always try to present as the Israelis who are the victim. The Israelis are now the fourth military power in the world, no? So, and the Palestinians have no army, no real power on any level. So there is these challenges that we are facing as people, as government, as community centers or NGOs, that some, of course, fail to fulfill their mission and run behind the funding because they need to survive and so on. And some like us who remain truthful to their mission. So if money comes that help us do what we really need to do, and for those who support us, be proud of the results, then be most welcome. If not, no thank you. Even sometimes Palestinian Authority, like a few years ago, the Ministry of Health asked me to create a theater play to make awareness about AIDS, the disease, you know. But AIDS is not a priority on any level in Palestine. So they wanted to create a theater play to go into the schools for the 15, 18 years old children to talk about AIDS and so on. I told them, well, AIDS is not on any priority level in Palestine. There was 67 declared cases of AIDS in Palestine at that time. I told them the tooth problem is a priority. There is more than 400,000 children with cavities and teeth problem. Junk food in the schools cantina is a priority. Garbage in the street is a priority, but not AIDS. Oh, the donor gave us this money, so we cannot do otherwise. Really? Well, we can do otherwise. So we did a theater play about teeth problem without any funding to say our priority is here. So if people want to help us with our priorities, be most welcome. If not, no, thank you. Don't deviate us and deform our priorities because you think this is the priority all over the world. It does not fit with us, even if it is presented through the Palestinian Authority, through the Palestinian Ministry of Health, and so on. And that's why we remain truthful to what we do. Unfortunately, not all are the same in that sense, because some people just need to keep the job going on. So they run from project to project and change orientation depending on the funding. So that also destroyed a lot within our community. Even some theater groups, the theater production become a project. There is funding, we create a theater play, we have funding to do 10 performances, and we can bring children with the snacks and so on. So when we do a theater play without any funding and want people to contribute 5 shekels or 10 shekels, like £1 or £2 and so on, oh, why should we pay you? Abba did the theater play without even she brought us sandwiches and snacks and brought a bus to take us to the theater and so on. Why should we pay for you? So that also destroyed all the creative work that people can do. Some theater plays are amazing and a lot are rubbish with these projects. But it's the same, it's a project, 10 shows, then another project and another 10 shows and so on. In the meantime, the real people who try to make something according to the priorities and needs of the community are erased and cannot compete on that level, unfortunately.
Maybe we go to the questions. There are a number of questions in the chat. Instead of me reading the questions out, would you like to speak to your questions? Does anyone want to start? If you'd like to ask a question, if you unmute yourself and then just ask.
Okay. I'm a theater lecturer interested in the shows you direct. Could you please elaborate on them? Well, thank you for this question. We started with children talking about their hopes and dreams. And the first play I created was We Are the Children of the Camp. And based on a lot of improvisation with children, asking them about what they want to say, what makes them happy, what annoys them, where they see themselves, and so on. So the play We Are the Children of the Camp recreated a little bit the narrative of Palestine from Balfour Declaration into the Nakba, into what they want to be in the future, what happens in the schools, what village they come from, where they ended, and checkpoints, and the media, and peace process, and so on. So the first thing was I wanted the children to be on stage, to be the actors, to be the stars they present. And of course, we dealt with plays about stereotypes. We did plays about children's rights, women's rights, about health, environmental issues, about problems in the community, drugs, smoking, whatever, about importance of education. We did move from children into semi-professional into professional productions as well, because since 1998, when we started, until today, we have generations that grew, and some of them became professional artists and so on. So we did co-productions also, like with the New Ottawa Theatre in 2012 with Arthur Milner play Facts. We did collaboration with French groups. We had Eva, who is here, who visited us and did amazing work about refugees as well, and so on. So there was plays that are related to Palestine, but also plays that were related to values that are common internationally, stereotyping or health or environmental issues. When Gaza was attacked, we did also with other theaters like Monologues of Gaza and so on. There was stories and narratives that were given. And there was also comic plays, comedies, to make fun about the tragedy of the situation some way or the other. We did local but also international tours. Since the year 2000, we toured in Sweden, Denmark, France, Belgium, Austria, United States, United Kingdom. And these tours were amazing possibilities to allow our young people to see normal life in free countries, see that we share a lot of things as human beings that should bring us closer to each other, and see that we have differences that enrich us and make us amazing human beings and put us on equal grounds. The second about with Eva. Would you like to comment on that, Eva, or?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to just say a little bit about, I mean, thank you so much, Abdelfattah, and to Maria as well for speaking and talking about the displacement and peoples in exile and the links between those different British colonies in Cyprus and in Palestine. And my kind of desire to want to talk for you both to talk this evening was very much in response to a talk that Ambrose curated some months ago, which was about Israeli artists talking about their work with refugees from all around the world coming to Israel, and for them to work with those refugees. At the same time, they are occupying illegally a country where they've made the Palestinian people refugees, and that became a kind of a huge concern for me. That level of denial is so solid. And as a British theatre maker, when I'm looking at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I'm accused of being anti-Semitic, and you've talked about that this evening, Abed, about and how that accusation of being anti-Semitic is a way of silencing British artists to bring up these questions, because it seems to me that there are many, many people internationally who are supporting the Israeli state to keep the status quo, to continue to expand the occupation of Palestine. But anyone, any country or individual artists that support Palestinian people and their rights are accused of being anti-Semitic. And this way, Palestine cannot fight alone. They cannot fight this occupation alone. And it is the connection between the international communities to support Palestine, to address this inequality. But also as a British person, I feel that so many people in this country are completely blind to the conflict and have little or no understanding of it. And it is complex and it is confusing, but that confusion and that complexity keeps everybody in their place. And that is that then basically keeps the status quo. So that's why I'm so delighted, really, that you were being able to speak so clearly and so passionately this evening, Abed. Thank you so much, and also to Maria as well for making these links, and to Ambrose as well for bringing this, for facilitating this evening. It's not so much a question; it's more a frustration and an acknowledgement of that denial and that inequality of support for the Palestinian people, for artists, and for Palestinian children and communities. That's it. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I see also that Norma. Hello, Norma. How are you? Have a question as well. Do you see this powerful belief in supporting young people to realize their creative and psychological potential on all fronts reflected, mirrored in any wider aspect of Palestinian Authority, government, organization, structure? I'll go also to Liu Yang. Thank you, Abdelfattah. Could you explain what is unique about artistic and creative means of struggle resistance that makes it effective in driving change and transformation? I think somehow the questions are related, so that's why I kind of put them together. They are one after the other anyway. But it is challenging to see transformation immediately with the artistic work. As I said, we try to offer possibilities, not to dictate a code of behavior. But when we kind of restart almost every day as if from -20, because with every Israeli incursion in the camp, And sometimes they did get in our facilities, they broke our main doors, and sometimes even they use the space to shoot at people outside from our own building. So creating this trust with the community, with people, especially who come from outside the camp, because participants are coming not only from Aida camp, but from all over Bethlehem area and beyond, to have this trust that this could be a safe place for children and young people to come and do dance and theater and music and cinema and so on, is challenging. With every incursion, you have to restart the process with the parents who, of course, are afraid that their children could be exposed to danger and so on. So we, again, through this creative process, the byproduct would hopefully will be the healing and building the peace within these young people through giving them that venue of free expression and telling their stories, shout as loud as they want, and find a way to build their peace within, to hopefully be peace builders in their community and in the world. Now, we are not affiliated politically to any party, so are not really involved with the government directly in that sense. However, we are working directly and volunteer to work with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Culture and support every action that could promote culture and arts and education. Why, as you said, I believe in the power of arts, because, as I said, when you see a film or a theater play, when you look at a painting or a photo, when you listen to music, I don't think you will care about where it comes from if you like it. If you like it, it touches you regardless of where it comes from. And I don't believe that people will say, I will not like it because it's a French or American or Palestinian or African or whatever. You like or don't like based on how much it touches you. So this is where people are on equal grounds. And these are the bridges that we can build as equals, not superior and inferior, not stereotype because of your country or your religion or whatever, but is the work itself that carries this magic and put people on equal grounds and I make people identify with the just causes. When you are doing theater, we have been a lot of times criticized that we are not balanced in theater. Like we tell our story. If anybody is telling the story, would anybody would say with the Holocaust, for example, what is the point of Hitler of doing that? Why didn't we put Hitler to say his justification for the Holocaust and so on? It's absurd. Theater is about asking the hard questions, not about giving answers. It's not about being politically correct or diplomatic or balanced. It's about giving the hard issues, and then people can find their own answers for whatever, and not it's just spoon feeding for whatever you do. And I believe in that power, that give a credit also for the audience to find their own answers and resolve the issues related to whatever values we are talking about. But in the same time, you cannot put the oppressor and oppressed on the same level and say they are equal on that level. So that's why the creative process, the act of resistance or beautiful resistance is having that space where people can say their stories, their version of their stories and history, without trying to please the audience or whoever or the funders by the version they think they want to hear. But to be truthful, because if you are not truthful to yourself, how can you be truthful with anybody? And if you are not in peace with yourself, how can you make peace with anybody? And the amazing thing, the amazing magic is also when you have celebrities, artists who have millions of followers, they have a huger impact on their followers than the politicians. And so if they guide their audiences to the just causes and not again be politically correct and try to remain neutral in certain conditions like the Palestinian case, but they would be vocal like Maria said, with Ukraine, for example, or more than with Palestine or with other not politically correct situations, then it's a tragedy. So they have a magic, they have a power more than the politicians in influencing people and making a space where values mean something really, and not remain in this political hypocrisy and complicity with an injustice that is going on. It makes it effective because it is a beautiful, creative, non-armed way to save lives and inspire hope and promote living, and so on. Is it a magical wand? No, it is not a magical wand. I don't think that there is any liberation movement in the world that was achieved by one way only. There is always a combination of ways that lead to liberation, and every group, every people have these different ways combined to achieve the liberation and freedom and independence. But the journey is most focused on personal, that hopefully will become collective. Personal in the way that to find these means to build peace within. And I could say clearly that if I look at these 25 years of the work of Alrowwad, during these 25 years, almost 97 to 98% of the children who passed by Alrowwad has not been killed or imprisoned or injured or whatever, but they have done something that is productive, that high education or success or became artist or professional one way or the other, and so on. So that is a great achievement in a context where everything pushes to despair one way or the other. And again, the creative part of it is not like therapy, but it's auto-healing by the creative process itself that these young people find their way to express, and so on. I am not, again, a therapist. I am not considering these people are sick and need a treatment. Their creativity is the thing that helps them heal and find their peace within themselves one way or the other. So I hope that responds to Norma and Leon.
Before we go to Maria, can I just ask, what do you mean when you use the phrase political correctness?
Politically correct is what the media want you to say, what the Israelis want you to say, what the government, American or European, want you to say. That if you criticize Israel, you cannot criticize Israel. You should be politically correct and agree that this is the only democracy in the Middle East, that Israel is beyond accountability, and so on. When you are politically correct, you accept what the donor wants you to do and not protest of the dictation of donors, and so on. And so being politically correct is talking, the Israelis are suffering, the Palestinians are suffering. The Israelis have the right to defend themselves, the Palestinians have no right to defend themselves because they are terrorists, and so on. This is unfortunately the narrative. When people start talking about the Palestinian right to defend themselves, but the Israelis are suffering, but well, there is an occupation and there is an occupier. You cannot put people in equal grounds to say the suffering Israelis is the same as the suffering of the Palestinian as occupier and occupied. You cannot say that the apartheid system in South Africa, the white people are suffering the same thing as the African people are suffering, and so on. So there is, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, you cannot say Americans are suffering the same, because if you are white, you have not the same suffering as the black in America, and so on. So being politically correct is that being a neutral kind of in face of justice, injustice and oppression, and so on, and try to find excuses for even the oppressor to put them on equal grounds. Well, I mean, this is a problem to be politically correct in such situation.
But is that political correctness? Isn't that actually the opposite of political correctness?
What?
That, equating, equating Palestinian struggles with Israeli experiences.
Well,
that
I see
can't
your
be
point.
political correctness.
I see your point. I see your point. Yes, if it is on the level of justice and equality, the politically correct situation is tell the oppressor you are the oppressor and support the oppressed, whoever they are, without reference to make this politically correct thing depending on who is the oppressed and who is the oppressor. So I see your point. But in the sense that we are using it, it's to be kind of diplomatic or neutral when you are politically correct. Like we have politicians who come and visit and say, it's horrible what the Israelis are doing to you. It's horrible how the Palestinians are suffering and so on. But when they are in the mic in front of the media, they would see the two sides have to do this and the two sides have to do that, as everything is as if they are equal in that sense of responsibility of what is happening. So maybe the terminology is not politically correct as I use it, but that's I see your point.
We go to Maria, and then Maria, is there anything that you'd like to add to what's been said?
Not really. I was wondering the background of Abdullah Fad. It's a video. Where can we access it? Is it on you shared the YouTube channel? Can we access it there?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we
Okay.
have a YouTube channel. Go to videos, and there is different plays that are on YouTube. If you have problem, just contact me. I put also my email and my WhatsApp, I think, number, uh, as well as the phone of the organization. Yeah. So we are also on Facebook. You can put Alrowwad Cultural and Art Society on Facebook as well. And that give you access to almost daily activities and programs and so on. But yeah, we have many plays that are on Facebook, on YouTube channel, on our YouTube channel, actually.
All right, thank you. But yeah, I don't have anything to add, bros. Thanks.
Okay, so maybe at this point, we come to end notes. Final words from you, Maria, and also from Abdelfattah. And in those final words, maybe you could also say something about the hopes that you have and how we get to those hopes. We'll start with Maria and finish with Abdelfattah.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I do believe in social justice, and I really think knowledge is powerful. So for me, hope is education, but not the current education. I hope in the future education will include experiences of people, so that younger generations get to know what it means to be a refugee, what it means to lose your family home and not be able to go there. So sharing these experiences for me is hope. And I do hope in the future we have a more inclusive education where we understand the human condition rather than getting to know what happened and when and that's it, and following the agendas of politicians and what they want to do. So my hope for the future is the new generations to be more informed of what is happening, and hopefully they will have more rights or more power to change what is happening across the world as well. I'm not talking about a specific crisis, but it's about all over the world, and hopefully it will end any kind of social injustice, and to bring accountability as well, for what is happening. So that's for me. Thanks.
I would like to thank you all for your presence with us. Thank you, Eva, for putting this possibility with Ambrose and Maria and all these people who remained with us until now and who were with us. I guess the most important thing that we try to say is that every single one of us is important, and every single one of us is a change maker. And change will not happen alone. And even God will not help those who do not help themselves if you are a believer. So that's why if people are waiting for the government or others to do the work, well, the others will also wait for you to do the work, and nobody will do anything at the end of the day. So that's why this is a commitment that we have, not only for our children, but for your children and the generations to come, to work so that every day that comes is more beautiful than the day that goes. I believe in the power of arts, and I believe in the power of culture and education to make and build these bridges among us as human beings, as change makers, as people who can build this world better than anybody else. And that we have that responsibility. If one of these if one of these days, one of your children or our children or whoever children come and look us in the face and say, what did you do to make a change? What heritage are you leaving us? So hopefully none of us will fade in shame and say, I thought the president will do it, or the king will do it, or whoever will do it, but would probably say, I did something. Maybe it did not change the world for the moment, but hopefully with the continuity, it would lead to a change, however slight it is. And that's the engagement we have. That's the engagement we have to remain truthful, to work for the priorities, and to consider that every injustice is not acceptable against whoever it happens. And every act, a victim should be supported, whoever they are. And if Black people are suffering, I am Black. If Jews are suffering, I am Jewish. If Muslims are suffering, I am Muslim. If Christians are suffering, I am Christian. And whatever the victim is, I am that person. And I should support this person because injustice is not acceptable against anybody. And racism and apartheid and whatever marginalization against people, we should remain truthful to what is just and what is right in that sense. And people should be allowed to tell their stories and not to be censored because of their version of their story and history. And so Jews have their narrative, Palestinians have their narrative, Tibetans have their narrative, Africans have their narrative. Everybody should be in that possibility to tell their narrative and not to be boycotted because there is other powers that dominate the narrative. And artists, I guess, again and again, they have that power to make these stories visible one way or the other. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So we've been listening to Abdelfattah Abusrour, who is founder and director of Alrowwad Cultural and Arts Society, which was established in 1998 in Aida refugee camp in Bethlehem. Abdelfattah is also an author, actor, and theater director. And as you've seen, he believes in the power of art and culture as pure humanity, where stereotypes vanish and people are on equal ground. Also speaking today was Dr. Maria Photiou, who is an art historian at the University of Derby in the UK. Maria's current research focuses on exploring art and migration from feminist and decolonial perspectives, with a special focus on the Middle East. And she is co-editor of the anthology Art, Borders, and Belonging on Home and Migration. And tonight's conversation was Palestine in Focus, where we were looking at Palestine and also thinking about what art is doing within the context of Palestine and also within the context of forced migration. And the conversation itself is part of a monthly series, which is called Forced Migration in the Arts, which brings together artists, people with lived experience of forced migration, activists, and academics for conversation on forced migration in the arts. The video from this conversation will be posted on Civic Leicester, on the Civic Leicester YouTube channel. If you subscribe, you can get updates when the video is posted. And our next event in the series will take place in will take place last Thursday of September. I will circulate the details shortly. So without more from me, I say thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to our speakers and to you who were listening, and see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abusrour, and thank you, everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Abed.
Bye.
Bye, Maria.
Bye.
Bye.